Hey everyone, this is Pat with Infinite Fitness, and today we're going to be talking about how to calculate your ideal protein intake for building muscle. So what I want to start out with today is, why does building muscle even matter in the first place, right? And I think that this question is going to be very contextual based on where you are in life. So if you're somebody that's younger, you want to look a certain way, increased muscle mass is going to help you look more toned. So as you lose body fat, you're going to look better the more muscle that you have, right? Now, if you're a little bit older and you're kind of getting into those advancing years for life, one of the reasons why having more muscle mass is important is it decreases your risk of falling, it decreases your risk of injury overall, and keeping more muscle mass as you age is correlated with decreased overall mortality. So that's super important. And then number three, let's say that you're somebody that is a strength athlete or something like that. The more muscle mass that you have, the higher likelihood it is that you're going to be able to get stronger. So there's a lot of reasons why muscle mass matters, but let's talk a little bit more about how you can maximize your protein intake to maximize your muscle mass. So before we get into the exact numbers and how to calculate all this stuff, I want to talk about some common misconceptions. So if you were to ask someone, hey, what's the ideal amount of protein for me? A lot of people will point to the RDA for protein, which is only about 50 grams per day. And that is definitely on the low side for maximizing muscle mass. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you have people that will say, oh, well, you need 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight. And now this is not necessarily super far from the truth, and I'll get into that a little bit later, but it also could be much too high or much too low, depending upon the person, how lean they are, how much body fat they have, and things like that. So there's a lot of common misconceptions about how much protein that you should be eating. And so throughout this video, we're going to kind of dive into some of those misconceptions and how to debunk them. And then we're also going to talk about kind of where to go based on where your current protein intake is. So the first thing that you want to do when you are calculating your ideal protein intake is you want to find out how much body fat you have, okay? Now, this is not necessarily the easiest thing to do, and it's a little bit harder to get it laser accurate. So what I would say is, as long as you're within the ballpark of roughly how much body fat percentage you have, you're probably going to be close enough with your protein intake to maximize your muscle mass. So there's a lot of different ways that you can find your total fat mass, right? So you can use something like a body impedance scanner, which is one of those handheld devices, or if you have access to an in-body scale, or even some scales at home will also show you your body fat percentage. So those are probably the simplest ways to do it. There's a lot of other ways that are a bit more complex. You could use skin fold calipers, or you can get a DEXA scan or something like that, but those are obviously a little bit less accessible for the average person. So for the average person, using a scale or a body impedance scanner, or even an in-body, depending upon where you go to the gym, is a really great way to start. Now, once you know what your fat mass is, your body fat percentage, you have to multiply it by your total weight. So let's say that you are a 200-pound person and you are 20% body fat. If you multiply 200 by 0.2, that's going to give you your total fat mass, okay? And that would be about 40 pounds of body fat. Now, once you have that number, then we need to use that number to find your lean mass, right? And so lean mass is going to be anything on your body that's not fat mass. So that's going to be like water, it's going to be muscle tissue, bone, connective tissue, all those things, right? Organs. So let's say you take that 200-pound person and you subtract 40 pounds from that 200 pounds, right? So now we have a number of 160. So that means that this person has 160 pounds of lean mass on their body. Now, once we know that, where do we go from there? Now, before we get too deep into where to go next, I want to talk a little bit about some of the margin for error with using a scale or a body impedance scanner or an in-body or something like that. So typically, if you look at the research, body impedance scanners can under or overestimate fat mass by anywhere between 4 and 8%. Now, that's a pretty large margin for error. It's not astronomical, but it's definitely high enough to matter, right? So one of the things that I personally like to do with my clients is I like to kind of compare what they look like to a picture body fat chart, right? So if you go online and you search body fat chart images, right? It'll show you what different body fats look like. It'll have your 5%, 10, 15, 20, 25%. And so whichever one of those pictures you are closest resembling is usually a good place to start. So let's say that you step on one of these body impedance scanners and it says that you have a body fat percentage of 25%. but you look at one of these body fat charts, like the pictures, and it looks like you have closer to 20% body fat, right? You could meet somewhere in the middle. And again, you don't have to split hairs with this, but I would use your best judgment if you feel like the body fat scanner is egregiously overestimating how much body fat you have, just taper it down a little bit. If you feel like it's egregiously underestimating how much body fat you have, just taper it up a little bit to be a little bit more accurate. So now that we have calculated your lean mass, right? So when we're gonna use our 200-pound person as an example here, right? We've figured out that they have 160 pounds of lean mass. What we're now gonna do is we're gonna figure out what type of caloric state this person is in. So there are 3 types of caloric states that you can exist in. You have a calorie deficit, which is occurring when you are losing weight. You have a calorie surplus, which is when you are intentionally gaining weight or gaining muscle mass. And then you have calorie maintenance, which is when you are just maintaining your weight. So each of these states is going to depend on how much protein this person needs to consume, right? So let's say that this 200-pound person who has 160 pounds of lean mass is currently in calorie maintenance, okay? What they are going to do is they are going to consume 1 gram of protein per pound of lean mass. So you can kind of see here how this 200-pound person only needs 160 grams of protein because they have 160 pounds of lean mass on their body. So that estimation of, oh, you need 1 gram per pound of body weight is a little bit over for this particular person because of their current calorie state, their body fat percentage, all of the above. Now, let's say that the same person was in a calorie surplus, all right? Let's say that they were eating more calories than they needed every day to build muscle mass. When this happens, your protein needs actually go down, right? And there's a couple reasons why that is. So number one, when you are in a surplus of calories, your body is less likely to liberate lean mass, right? So muscle mass is very expensive tissue. Your body has to kind of fight to keep it alive. Whereas like fat mass just kind of sits there, it's stored energy. Your body, if anything, wants fat mass. And muscle mass, your body wants to limit the total amount that it has because it's expensive tissue. So when you're in a surplus of calories, you don't need as much protein because you're less likely to lose lean mass. So your protein needs actually go down to 0.8 grams per pound of lean mass. So now if we use that as a calculation, our 200-pound person who's 20% body fat and has 160 pounds of lean mass, they would only need about 130 grams of protein when they're in a calorie surplus. And so one of the reasons why tapering down your protein in a calorie surplus can be beneficial is it's much harder to consume all of those calories when you are actively trying to gain weight, especially like healthy calories. So tapering down your protein can make that a little easier. Now, if we go the opposite direction and we have this same person and they're in a calorie deficit, all right, they're actually gonna need more proteins. Their protein needs are gonna go up to 1.2 grams per pound of lean mass. Now, the reason why this is we're gonna go back to that whole concept of muscle mass being expensive tissue. Muscle mass being expensive tissue, your body wants to liberate it. So when you're in a calorie deficit and actively trying to lose weight, you actually need more protein to ensure that you don't lose the lean mass that you've worked so hard for, or at least if you are losing it, that you're minimizing the amount that you're losing. So if we take that number, 160 pounds of lean mass, we multiply it by 1.2, their protein needs would go up to around 190 grams per day. So we're a little closer to that 1 gram per pound of body weight for this person, but we're not quite all the way there, right? So based on the caloric state that you're in is going to depend on how much protein that you are going to consume each day. Now, there is one other factor that we want to consider when it comes to total protein intake. So that last factor is going to be age, okay? Now, what the research shows is that for every year that you are above 30 years old, your protein needs increase by 1 to 3%. So what that means is, let's say that we take this 200-pound person and they have 160 pounds of lean mass on them, and let's say that they're 40 years old, and we use the bottom end of that range, let's say 1% for every year above 30 that they are, that's gonna be 10% extra protein that they need to consume. And so part of the reason why protein needs go up as we age is our body is kind of degenerating a little faster just due to environmental factors. As we age, our bodies break down a little bit faster than they rebuild. So your protein needs are a little higher to keep that muscle mass because building muscle gets harder and harder as you age. So if we take that factor, we say that this person's 40 years old, their protein needs are 10% higher. So if they were in a calorie maintenance phase, they would need 176 grams of protein if they were 10 years above 30 or 40 years old. So when you're calculating your age into this whole equation, you can really use any number between 1 and 3% for every year that you are above 30. So if you want to meet in the middle, you could use 2%. If you want to be on the conservative side, you could do 1%. Or if you really want to be sure that you're getting enough protein, you could use 3%. And so you can see here how in all of these different scenarios, right, your protein needs are going to change. And that's why that typical, like, oh, you need 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight it misses the mark. And it misses the mark because in some cases it might be close to what you need to consume. In other cases, it might be way above what you need to consume. And in other cases, it might be well below what you need to consume. So let's say that this person, right, we use this same scenario here, and they're 40 years old, they're in a calorie deficit, and they have 160 pounds of lean mass. So because they're in a calorie deficit, they need more protein. So they're gonna be around 190 grams because they need to multiply their lean mass by 1.2 grams per pound. And then they also are 10 years above 30, so their protein needs are at least 10% higher. So that means that they're actually gonna be somewhere around 210 grams of protein or more, depending upon if they wanna use a higher percentage rate for every year above 30 that they are. So when you're calculating your ideal protein intake, you wanna take all these factors into consideration. So I know I threw a lot of information at you today, so I wanna just recap everything and just make it nice and seamless. So if you wanna calculate your ideal protein intake, the first thing you need to find out is how much body fat percentage you have. After you find out how much body fat percentage that you have, you need to subtract that from your total weight to figure out how much lean mass you have. Once you know how much lean mass you have, you are then going to multiply that number based on your caloric state. 0.8 grams if you're in a calorie surplus, 1 gram per pound of lean mass if you are in a isocaloric state, meaning you're in maintenance, and 1.2 grams if you're in a calorie deficit. So after you calculate your protein needs based on your caloric state, then you want to calculate your protein needs based on your age. So for every year above 30 you are, your protein needs are gonna go up by 1 to 3%. So you're gonna take your lean mass, multiply it by whatever type of caloric state you are, between 0.8 and 1.2 grams per pound of lean mass. And then you're gonna multiply that by 1 to 3% for every year above 30 that you are, and that's gonna give you your ideal protein intake. So I wanna finish out this video by saying, if you've gone through this whole process and calculated your ideal protein intake, that number might be well above where you currently are consuming protein, especially if you're new to this whole fitness thing. That number might be well over 100 grams higher than how much protein you're consuming right now. If that's the case, here's what I want to explain to you. I would take a conservative approach to increasing your protein intake. So let's say that you need to eat 150 grams per day and you're only eating 100 grams per day right now. What I would start to do slowly is I would add anywhere between 10 and 15 grams of protein per day, and then stick with that new protein intake for at least a couple weeks, let your digestive system get used to it, and then slowly continue to increase it until you get to your ideal protein intake. Now, there are gonna be some cases of people that just cannot get to that ideal protein intake. And if that's you, that is okay. What I would recommend is try to find a level of protein that you can intake every single day that allows you to stay consistent. So if you're hitting like 160 grams one day and then you're hitting 80 grams the next day, that's not ideal. It would be much better to kind of meet in the middle and try to eat that amount of protein every single day. Okay, so just make sure that you take your lifestyle factors into consideration when calculating this number and deciding what direction that you want to go. So I hope that you all learned something from this video. If you did, please, please, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. It really helps. And also you can give us a follow on Instagram at IF Personal Training. You can also check us out on the web at www.infinitefitness.studio.